On today's episode of Wrestling Changed My Life.
I never want anybody to fear the fear of losing. And, part of taking that fear away from them is knowing that you did everything you could possibly do to prepare for that moment.
Well, I was a fanatic. There's no doubt a fanatic. My goal was to get carried out of the wrestling room because of exhaustion, and it never happened. The thing it did for me every day about 6 o'clock is that when I got out, I looked back in and there was nobody else there. Bottom line was, I didn't reach my goal. So guess what happened? I went back in the room again. But I got some quality time because of just some kind of a fanatic goal.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Today's episode is with Jeff Buxton. Now, Coach Buxton is one of the most elite high school coaches of any sport of all time. During a 20-year run, his team achieved the number one national ranking in 10 of those 20 years. And wrestling fan or not, you're going to learn a ton from one of the greatest coaches of our generation. We get into his childhood, which was incredibly challenging, and how that shaped his life. We talk about how he built a dynasty and some of the lessons he learned about motivation and leadership that are applicable to any skill, wrestling or not. So I really hope you enjoy this one. As always, if you enjoy this episode, please subscribe on iTunes, give us a rating, and check out WrestlingChangedMyLife.org for past episodes. Coach Buxton, we're live on the show here. We're out at Lehigh Valley. Obviously, it's a wrestling podcast. You're a legend in the sport. How did you get involved with wrestling originally?
So I moved in with my aunt and uncle when I was 12 years old, and they had a bunch of sons who wrestled. And so, it was, I kind of followed the footsteps of two of my older, I call them my brothers now, they're my cousins.
Yeah.
I followed their footsteps and went into, it was sixth grade, I went into football, first time I played football before. And then I wrestled in the winter, and then I played lacrosse in the springs, and, kind of followed what they had done before that.
Yep.
And it was a very athletic family, a very competitive family. On the weekends we always played touch football. On Sundays, big Thanksgiving games in the front yard. And so it was, just about everything we did was competitive. Playing cards, playing board games. It was that type of family. There were 7 of them, so I joined a big family, and for me, it was a life-changing situation because both my parents died when I was younger, and it was certainly I was one of those kids that probably wasn't going down the right road, and moving in with them certainly put me down the right path.
Yeah. I mean, I did know that you had lost your parents, and obviously wrestling or anything that brings structure to your life is going to help. What were you like before wrestling?
Kind of a hangout kid at the beach. My brothers were surfers, very good surfers. So, I used to go watch them surf all the time. I had an older brother that had moved out of the house, even before I can even remember. And then I had a younger brother that ended up moving. When I moved up to Rhode Island with my aunt and uncle, I ended up going to the West Coast. Unfortunately, all my brothers are dead now, and so that was, things that happened. 2 of them were murdered. The other 2 died of drugs and alcohol. So it was a tough lifestyle growing up, and I feel very lucky and fortunate to move into a family that cared about me, that made me excel in school, certainly in athletics, and had a really good experience with just about every coach that I was involved in when I moved up to Rhode Island. From 6th, 7th, 8th, and going up through high school, I felt that I had great coaches around me, good role models.
Mm-hmm.
Made the sports fun for me, and I got really involved in sports, and then went on to the University of Rhode Island. Once again had great role models and coaches with a guy named Malin Nero and another guy named Gary Barton, and then Carl Adams. So I feel very fortunate to be coached by those people, and them giving me a real good kind of some of them were systematic, others were not, but a really good approach into how I started coaching as a young coach. And I worked in a high school very early in my career in Rhode Island, and took away a lot of interesting things from that experience. And it was a different type of kid that went to the school. It was a school that most didn't go off to college. They got them ready through vocations that were already in the school. So it was a different type of kid that I worked with at Blair. And the kids at Blair were just incredible all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, totally different type of kid. And I want to go back to your competition days, because you were an undefeated, 4-time undefeated prep champ in your day.
It wasn't much. The competition in growing up in Rhode Island is not the greatest, and I only went to the national preps 1 year because my junior year I went and I didn't get through the skin check. Zach Reyes said that I'm probably the guy who started all that stuff. But anyways, it was the competition was not always the greatest, and what I did, and I got some information from people, because up in New England it's just not, and especially in the 60s and 70s, it's not a popular sport. Ice hockey is, and so when you would get around people that knew wrestling, to me it was fantastic, and I used to travel quite a bit just to do that, and I don't even know who it was, but got me to go to Doug Blueball's camp when I was in 10th grade, and that was, a big eye opener for me, just to be around a guy like that and have so much knowledge. And there was Tom Milkovich was at that camp at the time, and another time was Pat. So it was great for me, just to learn from these guys and know that there was just a different technical world out there than I was exposed to. Obviously, my older brothers had a big influence on me. We bought a book back in the 70s, a Bobby Douglas book, and we would go through that and learn technique and try things out. And that's basically how I started fooling around with different things, because we just didn't have the exposure, or we didn't have the technology that we have today. Yeah. Where you're able to watch the World Championships and see what's going on. I remember in 1972, just the ability to watch the first time I saw the Olympics on TV and watched just a little bit of the 72 Olympics, and how exciting it was. And then it went from trying to move my antenna up on the roof to get it to face channel 39 to watch the Lehigh matches all the way up in Rhode Island. Right. That's something that we do. I have my brother up on the roof. Move it to the left a little bit more, and we watch a snowy wrestling match. But that's how I learned.
You just loved it, huh?
Yes, yeah. And I had success in football. I'm a little tiny guy, but I love playing football, and I love playing lacrosse. It's a great game, and I played played both when I went to college. I played lacrosse and wrestling, but it was sports were a big part of my life, the main attraction was probably growing up in the family I did grow up in, because everybody was an athlete. We used to play basketball together. We used to play stickball together, home run derby. We had a rope swing that we made all kinds of, different games on the rope swing. But everything was a, kind of a competitive, athletic thing in the family.
That's fascinating. It reminds me of two themes from this book called The Talent Code. Have you ever read it?
No.
So they study elite pockets of talent throughout the world. Like, there's a small town in Brazil that produces like 30% of the Brazilian soccer team, the national team. But they said two things stick out, and the first is being a younger sibling, which certainly you were, and the second was some type of major tragedy at a young age, where like 30% of the female Russian tennis players that come out of this small camp, they had a single parent family or something like that. So do you think something like that created your drive?
I don't know, whether it was a family tragedy. You try to leave those experiences and in those memories, in a back place in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, it's Veterans Day today, and my father had fought in World War II and in the Korean War and died while being a Navy pilot. So that's heavy in my heart today, and it's something that I think about. And I didn't even get to know the man. He died when I was 3 months old. And I've heard incredible stories about him, and what kind of athlete he was at a young age, and coming up through the Navy and being a pilot, and then being a Blue Angel. The things that you're really proud of, and I think of him, when Veteran Days comes around.
Amazing, yeah, and. It's an incredible sacrifice. I have a cousin who's in the service, so certainly they're all in our thoughts today. And so, Coach, when you got to Blair in '82, you were a wrestling coach and a lacrosse coach, but then in '91, narrowed your focus just to wrestling, I believe.
Yes, and that's more of me saying that somebody needed to put the time in, like I was putting in wrestling and lacrosse, to make that program go a little bit better. And I was running ragged, trying to run freestyle practices in the spring, and then doing some the things that I did in the off season with the athletes, and whether it was in the fall or the spring or the summer, that I felt that somebody should be doing with the lacrosse players. So it wasn't. It was more of a another person needing to take over that program and bringing it to, I think, where a different level than where I was. And I enjoyed coaching, but it was really hard for me to do. My job as a math teacher, and then work in a dormitory, and then you're a monitor, and then you're a coach this season and a coach another season, but trying to manage that program all the way through. Being a teacher at Blair is really hard. There's a lot of expectation out of you. Your preparation for class has to be top notch, because you got very bright kids going in there every day, asking questions, wanting to learn, and then turning that around and going into a wrestling room where the kids would push you just about every second of every practice.
I'm excited to get into those practices and the guys you worked with. And just for the listeners who don't know, give them a 30-second commercial on Blair. It's a very unique school.
So it's a school of about 500 kids in Northwest New Jersey. I want to say 350 to maybe 375 are kids who live there. So you take on a different responsibility as a teacher. You're around kids 24/7, and basically being a teacher as well as a parent, or not their parent, but whether it's a big brother or an older figure in their lives that are helping them manage what they're trying to do academically, athletically, socially. So it's a very different. I worked in a public school for 2 years. It's a very different scenario of what happens with a kid in their daily lives. You have a lot of control. And how you want kids to manage their lives, and a lot of them are looking for that, which is really good. The class settings are very small. I had some classes that were small as 7, and maybe the largest one was maybe 15 to 19 kids, and so the class sizes are very small. So there's an individual approach to what happens in a classroom, and your worst problem that you have there is somebody didn't finish their homework or didn't do their homework that night. So that it's a very different situation than working in an inner city school or say just a regular urban town. There's a high expectation from the parents, there's a high expectation from the kids, and there's a high expectation from the faculty. So you're expected to do a lot. You're expected to be very motivated, and if you don't, you're gone. So it's
no nonsense there. And you had, maybe not you in particular, but the school in general had kids whose family were like Saudi princes, and
so it's a different
incredible.
It's a unbelievable diversity at Blair. They had kids that lived in the inner city to kids from Russia to kids from Japan, China. So there was a big diversity of kids who went there, and I think the school did a very good job of keeping it that way. There were a lot of kids there that needed it, that were looking for something a little bit different than they got in their public school education.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that it's better or it's worse. It's more of kids looking for a change, and there's got to be that other hook like wrestling or football or basketball, because there are a lot of private schools that are out there, but something that grabs a kid's eye and he makes them want to go to school, because it's expensive, it's hard, it's demanding, but I'm really happy that my kids got the experience to be able to go to Blair.
Yeah, I mean, and you ended up coaching your son.
Yep.
Eventually, is that right?
I coached them. I had both my kids in class.
Okay.
So that's very different. I would say that the one thing that surprised me the most is I never realized how smart my son was until I taught him. He picks things up so quick, and I knew he was a good reader, and he always did well in school. But he's a very bright kid, and so it was that was like, wow, he's really smart.
That's amazing that you taught him as well. I guess I never made that connection, but of course you would have, and your daughter as well.
And my daughter, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, usually I think they try to keep kids out of their parents' classes, but sometimes it happens. And,
just overlaps.
Yeah. And coaching my son was. I tried to kind of back away from him, and he came after me, and it ended up being a really good experience for me, as well for him. It's one that because I know I'm a jerky coach at times and demand a lot, and you when you're coaching your own kid, the blood pressure goes up, the heart rate goes up, and you want them to do so well, and sometimes you don't say the right thing, you're maybe a little bit too hard on them. So I was always trying to watch what I said to him, to be careful about that. And he was fantastic. He's one of those kids that worked his butt off, and would be the first one in and the last one to leave, and was a good leader, good teammate, and he learned a lot by it, and graduated and had the chance to go to Harvard, and great experience for him.
Couldn't have asked for anything better, probably.
Yeah.
And we'll mention this in the intro credits, Coach, but when you took over Blair, they had won 3 national prep titles before that. Had a good background, but when you took over the 30-some years that you ran it, you guys finished number 1 in the country 10 times. Obviously just the most elite high school during that period, bar none. And so when you took over in 91, what was your vision for the program? Like, did you know where you wanted to take it?
I would just say that it mostly evolved and came along, and so in the early 80s, the success of the program was mostly through postgraduates. So there were kids that have already graduated from high school and came in for an extra year, and then we'd have a small group of wrestlers that were really talented, and so they would wrestle mostly against college competition and some, prep tournaments and some other high school tournaments. So they had their main team was competing against, mostly college freshman teams, and so that was in '82, and then in the later '80s, I tried to make a push for changing the high school schedule, and that's where it went in the 90s, and the school became a lot more popular, and so the demand of kids coming in became greater, and there wasn't that need to fill beds with the postgraduates. So I don't remember the exact number of my my first year, but I want to say that I think there were over 12 postgraduates there. Then sometimes it maybe even got up to 15, but it was a valuable experience for those postgraduates. And by the time I left in 2012, I think there was only 4 or 5 postgraduates, and I think even now they don't have any postgraduates there. So that it's unfortunate, but that program was a lot of work because what we developed around 2000 was a schedule for the postgraduates where they just we would wrestle mostly, and it was not a full team, so we would go to mostly tournaments, and a lot was in with the NWCA, and so we got involved in a lot in those events and going to the East Stroudsburg Open and any other type of opens that we could get those guys into. So they had, maybe a 40 to 50 match schedule, which was good, but most of it was tournaments because we just didn't have the numbers to do a dual team. So the high school schedule really developed then, and we were a big part of some of these bigger tournaments that came about, like the Ironman, the Beast of the East, the Reno Tournament of Champions, being a part of those, and then dragging all the other top teams in the country, and we started traveling and meeting each other, which I don't think was happening before that, and it took a lot of money, so we had to raise a lot of money to do all these things. But it gave kids an incredible opportunity to wrestle on a national level almost every weekend, and to compete against the people they needed to wrestle. And it was exciting to watch the Beast of the East really develop as a kind of a 12 tournament team, and then later I thought was a truly of a beast because it got the Ohio schools. It was dragging in some of the other schools from Pennsylvania, so it was getting the top New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania schools to go there, and so there were some great competitions, and certainly a lot of kids grew up in those tournaments, and a lot of good kids fell.
Yeah.
And same with the Ironman, and the Ironman has kind of held its status all the way through. It's still really, really competitive. We went to Reno twice. Great tournament, but I couldn't justify to myself enough bang for the buck.
Yeah.
So we stopped going out to the West Coast, and it's really hard for these kids to keep up with their academics and wrestling and everything they had to do in their lives if we were traveling that much. So I kind of pick and chose where we went, how we went, and tried to stay as local as we possibly could to avoid long travel all the time, and tried to pick times where I felt, because I was a teacher, where the kids wouldn't be stressed so much and we could have good tournaments. Like we went out to 2 years to a tournament in Oklahoma, and I just had my foot on the pedal too much, and I ended up not going back to it. I don't even know if they have those tournaments, but we went out to Broken Arrow one year, and God, I can't remember where the other place was, but at that point I felt it was too much on the kids, that it was too much competition, too much travel, not enough rest and recovery. Especially how we started our season with, we would start with, a tournament where, you're putting the singlets on and you're going to, right to the frying pan at the Ironman, followed by the Beast of the East. And then I really like going out to the Powerade. And, by that time we'd have 2 or 3 kids out of the lineup, which I didn't care, because it gave another kid an opportunity to see those tournaments. And the reason I like the Powerade is because Western Pennsylvania is such a great place to wrestle.
Yeah.
And the kids know how to scramble, they know how to ride, they know how to win matches, they wrestle the edge very well, and it just gave another thing for me to prepare for. And that was the whole idea of how I tried to set our season up was, at this tournament we need to prepare for this, at this tournament we need to prepare for that. And by the end of the year we got a full realm of the type of competition that we're going to wrestle. Because if you wrestled Easton High School, it's going to be very different than wrestling Great Bridge or wrestling Graham High School or wrestling, St. Ed's. So it was, as a coach, I had to work really hard in preparing our kids for those different competitions.
So you wanted to expose them as much as possible, and you even said you didn't want kids going to feed on your team if you could help it.
Well, I mean, that means you're doing the right things and you're putting them under the demands that I think that they need. And everybody does well if they're humbled, and if they can understand what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it, they buy into it. We had a couple of kids go undefeated, and they used to say, "Coach, you didn't do your job," but I did do my job and put them against the competition that they really needed. And like a guy like Stephen Mako, he was a freak as a junior in high school, and I couldn't even have him wrestle with the high school kids at this point. And so I had to bring in college kids and get them into competitions that would be appropriate for him. And he was ready to wrestle college level guys as a junior in high school. And I had a lot of other athletes I felt the same way.
Who are some others that stick out like that?
Mark Perry.
Unbelievable.
Zach Esposito, Corey Cooperman, Kurt Backus, Max Meltzer, Matt Palmer,
Ed Ruth?
Ed.
What was that guy like? Give us some insight into working with that specimen.
So the best thing I can say about Ed was he adapted really well. And he came to Blair, and it was a 1-year deal. And one of my former wrestlers, Murat Tamayev, who's just another interesting person. He came from Vladikavkaz, Ossetia. Came to Blair of me just talking to his coach at the '96 Olympics, and then we got him there the next year. And me understanding why this guy wanted to get this particular kid to the United States was to get an education. And really successful story, went on to Penn State, and he's still in the United States. He's runs a trucking firm. Just a fantastic person, still involved in the sport, but he was Ed Ruth's club coach. And he had the ability to know that Ed needed something different to make him jump a level, and I think Ed made it finish 5th in the Pennsylvania States, and which is a good accomplishment. But when he came to Blair, really took off, and I think mainly because of the structure of practice and everything that was going on. But one time he came late to practice 3 days in a row, and I was really chewing his butt out on the 3rd day, and he said to me, "Coach, you can stop yelling at me. I understand what you're saying. I won't be late again."
Oh.
And so so I understood Ed a lot more about his mentality, how he chose to do things. A very laid back guy, and we probably were teaching him too much wrestling, because there would be times where I would just say, "Hey Ed, slap the cradle on him. We need a pen right now." And he'd slap the cradle on him and pin him.
Yeah.
So he had the one thing that I really noticed about Ed was his grip strength, early on. And then one time in practice, he was on top of me, and I didn't like that at all. So I didn't go on bottom on him again. But he, he's an incredible athlete that has, a zillion tools, and was, could really wrestle. I mean, he'll be successful in the MMA. And,
oh yeah.
He's a character. He's very funny. During the first week of school, he told everybody, his dad's name is Ed, his brother's name is Edmund. His dad was Eddie, he was Ed, so it was a little bit of the...
Oh my God.
Well, anyways, the first week of school, he said, "Coach, my name's Latrell." So I went around and I told everybody, it's not Ed, it's Latrell. And so the first time Parents Weekend came around, I run into his parents, and I said to his parents, "Latrell's over there." And we kept on talking. I said again, "Latrell's over there if you want to go see him." And his mom finally turned to me and said, "Coach Buxton, who's Latrell?
So he was messing with you, huh?
Yes, he was messing with me.
Well, that story about him being late, it kind of goes, or it kind of makes the point of something you said, where you tell your guys you coach everyone the same, but really you coach them differently. Can you talk to that a little bit and that leadership philosophy?
Absolutely. So, there's different ways of motivating kids, and there's different ways of getting the best out of them, and there are different ways how you can make them enjoy the sport. So, I mean, even in my workout upstairs today, I had Joey McKenna, who's one of the best college wrestlers out there, and then he's training with Richie Lewis, who's a world champion, and then there's Darian Cruz, who's an NCAA champion, then there's Frank Pirelli, who's an All-American, and then I have Giuseppe Ray, who is a Division III wrestler, and they're all different types of people, and they're they all have different characters, and there's all different ways of trying to get the best out of them. You got to, I feel, and especially in that individualized type of situation, there's different ways to motivate them and different ways that you can get them to react the way that you want them to react. So I would. If I was talking to my team right now, I would tell them that I'm going to treat everybody the same, but there was no way that I would treat everybody the same. There are certain things that you're going to say to one kid that it's going to be different to another kid. And, trying to figure out the right buttons to push, or the right way to get them to accomplish what they want to accomplish are going to be, different settings. But you want to have it, I think, a little bit militaristic, where you have a lot of structure in your program, but you're able to bend, or you're able to talk to somebody differently than you would another person.
Yeah, so it seems to be a common theme though with all the great coaches. Phil Jackson, Coach Gable, obviously, they all talk about treating guys differently, whether it's Dennis Rodman, send him to Vegas for a couple of days and keep Jordan Pippen here. So it seems that that's a pervasive theme.
Well, when you're entrenched in the sport or entrenched in education, you kind of learn these things, and having the ability to, and I would say that as a wrestling coach, I'm a teacher. I sometimes will overdo the technical part of the sport, but I think it's an important part of the sport as well as the grind. So it's that mixture that's going to make somebody really, really good. Knowing how to push somebody to a level that they've never been pushed before, and knowing when to back off on that too. And sometimes you do it right, and sometimes you do it wrong. But the only way you're going to really find out how you're going to do it is you got to bring them there. And you don't want to push a kid over the top, I think, too much, because then it's going to turn them off, and they're going to have some kind of success to keep coming back and doing it. And it's not always the wins and the losses. It's that success that they get, whether they're competing on a good team or not, how they feel how they fit into it, and making everybody feel important to the team, I think is an important aspect.
Yeah. Well, and how do you, to your point, when you're pushing guys to the brink to get them to that dark place so they know what it's like, and then pulling them out, how do you structure a week of practices?
I would, I'm very different this way. I know what I'm going to do, and I'm always willing to change it on the fly.
Got it.
Even in my club practices, I'm trying to bring the energy to that practice right from the get-go. And if I feel the energy's down, or it's been back-to-back workouts that have caused the energy to be down, sometimes I have to change my practice on the go. So I never want to put somebody in a situation where it's the brink of pushing them so hard that they're going to get hurt. It's knowing how they feel, what they've been doing, how they've been doing it, what's the school day look like, or the college day have been like, what was the practice before this, knowing what you did, and you're trying to get the most out of them from maybe back-to-back hard days, or you're going to have to lay back. And there have been some times where I've been in a practice situation where I planned not having a hard practice. When I saw the mentality and what the effort was in practice, I kept it going.
Yeah.
So people have asked me how I've done that, and I say that's my feel.
It's a feel.
And you want me to write up a workout, I'll write it up, but I'll completely change it by the end of it, by where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So I'm never afraid to do that, and I think in talking with other coaches that are really successful, and Pat Santoro and I talk, constantly for, almost, since he wrestled with me in 1984.
Yeah.
It's been that kind of relationship that, we've been open and talking, and I think that he's taken a lot in his book from the things that, I've done and what I've, tried to do. The one thing that I always try to do is try to make one element of learning in a practice, whether it's going to be a grind practice or a light practice, that I want somebody to take something away from that practice from a technical standpoint that's going to make them better.
And how do you think about the mindset training? Because I think oftentimes the difference between the elite performers and the great performers is the attitude or mindset they have going into it and how they handle stress. What do you think about that?
100%. And I think that's the part that's the trickiest. And for an example, when I was at Blair, I would never let the wrestlers into the room until I was ready to let them into the room. So part of that was trying to have them come through the doors, to have the mindset of it's now to turn the switch on to practice. And so I've been into other wrestling rooms where kids kind of come in and they lay down. Some even fall asleep before practice.
Tying their shoes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
moving around.
I tried to make it. Once we hit the room, man, you're ready to go.
Wow.
And if it wasn't that, I would throw everybody out. And
you would kick people out?
The whole team.
How many times did you do that, you think? A couple times a year?
Probably more.
Really?
Yeah. Probably more.
And it's funny, you seem like a guy who really masters the balance of pushing kids and being real strict, but also having that trust with them too.
Yeah.
You probably don't admit that, but other people will say that.
If they don't trust you, they're not going to listen to you.
Right.
So, there was a high quality of athlete that was in the room today, and I feel each one of those guys trust me, and they know that I have their backs, and I'm trying to do everything I can for them to be successful on the world level.
Yeah.
I'm constantly pushing myself to become a better coach, to be a better technical coach, and I'm one of those guys that keeps on learning.
Yeah.
And I would, a little bit off the subject, but
no, please.
Since I've left Blair, my mind has been opened up way more because I'm around world-class athletes quite a bit. So I would say that I'm constantly changing, or I'm looking at something what this guy does as opposed to this guy does. And there's a lot of ways to finish a single leg, but trying to figure out what works best for this person is going through that. When I would say, growing up as a coach, this is the way you do it, and this is the only way you do it. And I've changed from that aspect quite a bit. And body types are different. Tactics are different for this person as opposed to this person. So there, you try to teach a team a certain type of system, but there are kids that are going to go outside of that system and do things a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. Like Corey Cooperman is a good example of it. I worked for a year, his freshman year, of trying not to let people touch his legs. And then I finally said, this is not working. Let's pull him into your legs. And he had huge success when anytime anybody touched his legs.
Scrambling and stuff like that.
Yeah. So,
okay.
For that kid, for Corey, it was different than it would be for like Zach Esposito. And so, Zach was a very good counter wrestler and did very well when people didn't touch his legs.
Right.
And then there's Mark Perry that was, he was a party. He let guys in on his legs. And so, in working with, those three different types of kids on a team, you had to have a little bit of a systematic approach that you had to do things this way, but then branching out on how they were wrestling was very different.
I just want to spend a little bit of time on Mark Perry before we go into some. I have about 4 questions from the listeners here for you. But with but Mark Perry, nephew of John Smith, he went to Iowa when I was in high school, so I was a huge fan of his. What was it like coaching a guy who has that type of wrestling tradition in the family, and he's moving from Oklahoma? I mean, talk to us about that a little bit.
Okay, so Mark loves the sport, loves everything about the sport. He loves the training. He loves the mindset of it. He loves the technical aspect of the sport, and he has an incredible mind, high IQ for wrestling. So the one thing that that kind of fascinated me about Mark was I could show him something, and then he would adapt it to how it would work best for him. So he was an incredible rider. He was incredibly tough to take down, and when he had to, he could find a way to score on his feet. So he had, I think, in the way that I feel, that he always felt that his destiny was to be an NCAA champion.
He truly believed that?
He truly believed that all the way through.
Wow, no doubt.
And so having the opportunity to have, to wrestle Hendricks in the finals and beat him, I didn't doubt it. He found a way to compete, even though that he wasn't right. His knee was bothering him. I mean, just an incredible performance.
Yeah.
I have the utmost respect for Mark as an athlete, and even more as a coach. He really breaks things down. He's very systematic about how he does things. He's been able to take things from other sports and adapt them to, he's a fan of the MMA and how they study people and how they prepare for people, and he takes the same type of attitude and what he's learned from that and doing it in now he's working at the RTC, but also in college wrestling. So I think he's a fantastic coach. And I feel the same way with Corey Cooperman and Zach Esposito, and these happen to be 3 guys on the same team that had incredible minds and could pick a lot of wrestling up fast. I remember giving Zach the European Championships, and he came back and showed me 15 things that he learned by just watching.
Wow.
So I had, and even up in the room I have now, I have incredible athletes that can do incredible things, that want to learn, and sometimes we'll take a situation and we'll work it out. And that was the same with those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just students of the sport. Great IQs, and sometimes in wrestling, sometimes in practice, I would just sit back and go, "Hey, did you just see what he did?" And it was just so much fun to coach.
These guys are scrapping each other, similar weights, and
yes.
just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, those are great stories, and I would love to keep on the wrestling, but some of the listeners are not wrestlers, and so I just want to shift to. I have 4 questions here for you, Coach, and we'll wrap this up. Fair?
Yeah.
Cool. So, when you think about competition, you're a guy who loves competition, and I got that from talking with you earlier. What is it about it that you love, and how do you think the great performers are able to take any sense of fear or stress away from it and just perform?
Well, I never want anybody to fear the fear of losing, and part of taking that fear away from them is knowing that you did everything you could possibly do to prepare for that moment. And so as a coach, you try to instill everything that you tried to prepare them to be at this moment, at this time, and to do things to their best abilities, and not to fear what's just about to happen, but to enjoy what's just about to happen. Having that opportunity to win an NCAA championship, or to make a world team and then go along and to be a world champion, of having that opportunity to go through the steps and the process that you need to go through. and bringing yourself to that point in your life, because you're not going to get it over again. You have that one chance of stepping out on the mat and to become, whatever tournament it is, or whatever, goal that you're trying to face, of trying to bring an athlete to that point. So whether it's from a technical standpoint, or from a training standpoint, or just from a mental standpoint of not fearing that task.
Got it. Okay. Man, I love it. What about visualization? When you think about visualizing a big competition, is that something you've ever worked on with your guys, or?
Well, what I will say is the best do it. And it's something that, and I don't know why I have this ability. I see something, and I go back and I try to work on it. And this was before videotaping was even big, of seeing something that you felt that would make you better, and being able to visualize it in your mind. Other people take them to more extremes of visualizing yourself on the podium winning the tournament. Hey, if you're not doing that already, you're not going to win. And part of that is believing in yourself enough that you're not talking about, well, what if I do this to lose, or what if I'm not prepared for this. You got to go and do the things that are going to prepare you for that process, and to be able to think that you're going to win these matches, because it's just not going to happen by chance. It's you got to believe it. 100% you got to believe it. You got to visualize how you're doing things, and I feel that the very best visualize incredibly well.
Right. Like, it's incredible detail, and they could spend 20, 30 minutes there without even noticing.
Yeah. I mean, so like for me, when I see something, I go back and visualize it. I visualize the hand position, the head position, the foot position, but also the entire move, and I can play it over and over in my mind. And I feel that the guys who like a David Taylor or a Kyle Dake or a Jordan Burroughs, man, they can do this incredibly well. Jaden Cox, incredibly well. Kyle Snyder, incredibly well. Gwiz. I mean, these are the best guys in the world that can do these things.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And what do you think about when you're starting to develop trust with a wrestler, or start working with coaches? Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see coaches making along those fronts? Not naming names, just in general, leadership or coach.
I think if you get down on an athlete, I mean, you can get down on them, but if you grind them to where they're to a point where, and I see parents do this a lot. They think they're doing the right thing for their kid, and especially in a losing situation where they're yelling at them or they punish them for a loss. Mm-hmm. I think is cruel, and because nobody wants to lose, nobody's planning on losing, for some people that come down to the end of a match and can't find a way to win, that's the goal. Put the ball in my hands, and that type of attitude where you're trying to teach them to do that. And those coaches that I think are, and I have to correct myself from doing this from time to time, of being too critical and saying the wrong thing, like you suck, or I'll say you suck in a teasing type of way of trying to motivate somebody to work a little bit harder, or what you did just sucked, or that's horrible, that's terrible. Knowing when to hit those type of moments are, I think, crucial. I think a lot of times when coaches are in that panic mode of coming to a competition and they try to rev it up, sometimes it can backfire on them because they put so much pressure on a kid to win, and there's got to be that enjoyment factor, the fun of going through the competition and enjoying what you're doing, instead of, man, this is so stressful.
Right.
And that was one thing that I tried to do when it came down to these matches of number one versus number two. of, hey, this is just another match. Go out and let's perform our best. This is what we've worked really hard for. Take the opportunity right now of going out and having fun in this moment. And that's the same if you watch Kyle Dake wrestle at the World Championships. Man, oh man, did he enjoy the moment. The same with David Taylor, the same with Jaden Cox. I mean, they just enjoyed the moment. And it was, it's been great watching these guys grow up, because I've known David and Kyle since they were young kids, and watching them develop through college, and even taking the step this year of winning their first national championships. I think they did it because they were in a good place.
Yeah.
They believed in themselves. They believed in their training, and they were prepared to win. Even though that Kyle had a setback in Krasnoyarsk. He learned from that setback, and the guy's is trained incredibly hard to put himself in this situation. But a lot of it is being more from a positive standpoint than from a negative standpoint.
Wasn't it amazing how much perseverance they had from some of the best college wrestling's ever had to offer? Then they just made their first world team this year.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Well, there's this guy, Jordan Burroughs. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so there were things in their way, and David's got himself bigger and 86 kilo, and there's a new weight class for Kyle, and there's a new weight class for Jaden, that has kind of worked out well for us, being able to put all these guys out on the mat. When they had it back to 6 weight classes, man, that's hard.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's
hard.
A shame. And do you know, are you familiar with Sam Calvita, the guy who Taylor works with?
Yes.
He works with Pico, Dillashaw.
Yes.
I mean, he seems to really have everything lined up out there.
Yeah, from diet to training. And he works with Frankie also, Frankie Pirelli.
Oh, he does?
Yes, and so, that's how I've gotten to know that aspect of it. And some of the things that I think Kyle does with his functional training is...
I saw that.
I think other people should learn from it. And, some people say that he's gone to this extreme, but, man... he's a gifted athlete before he started doing it, but now he's even a more gifted athlete.
There's a lot of woo-woo around the movement coaches, don't you think? Some of them do it really well. Some are a little snake oil. I mean, what do you think about it?
Whatever works, works. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. So
McGregor does that with Ido Portal.
Yes. You're talking about, when we were talking before about mindset. If this is what puts a guy in a good place, then let's do it. This has all of these guys in a good place in their lives, and what they're doing in their competition, and they're doing it really well.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Then that plays along with the mindset. Really does. It really does.
So it's and what you were going back to earlier is kind of about the stress of a big match or a tournament. It's just what you tell yourself, right? If you tell yourself this is an exciting moment versus a stressful moment, that's what you're going to believe.
Mm-hmm. I think really, to be successful, you have to picture in your own mind that you're a success.
Right.
And in working with younger athletes and having them believe in themselves is really important. And trying to talk to them about, they'll say to me, I really hope I don't mess up this match. And I said, well, you already did.
It's a fear-based
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
You should be thinking about how successful that you're going to be in this match,
yeah.
how much fun you're going to have when you wrestle in this match,
right.
and how much you're going to open up and make things happen, because you can't do it over again.
Right.
And
it goes back to that notion of we have 2 types of thoughts: constriction-based thoughts, things that make us scared, tight, make us very anxious, or expansion-based thoughts. And it creates movement, it creates looseness, and it's a good feel-good thing. Yes,
I think when people are loose and having fun with the sport, that they're going to be a lot more successful.
Yeah.
And it's different than these one-on-one sports are very different than team sports. That where there can be one guy that's down and then everybody gets that, or there was another person on the team to be able to get that person up, to get them to perform a little bit better. And in wrestling or in boxing or in golf or in tennis, you have to have that mindset of being a cheerleader as well as a coach, and getting yourself up, prepared, and how you're going to present yourself in competition. And to me, that comes from what you're going to do in practice. If you're not doing these things in practice,
Right.
it's really hard to get yourself ready for a competitive moment.
Right, and I think that's a good point. The mindset, all that's great. It's only great if it's coupled with the actual work.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, last question here for you, coaches. For the non-wrestlers listening, everyone looks at wrestling as a way to develop mental toughness, discipline, hard work, all those great qualities, but mental toughness to me sticks out, and for a number of reasons. But do you think mental toughness can be learned or taught?
Good question. So I've talked to, and I've experienced most of my experience is by me doing things instead of me reading about them. And when I read about them, I go, "Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I wish I read about this sooner." But I've talked with Navy SEALs a lot about mental toughness, and they really believe that they have a way of developing mental toughness. And I would agree to that, but I also agree that they find a way of bringing mental toughness out in those people that I think you're really born with it.
You think deep down it's
Deep down,
there?
I think it's really...
They just weed out the ones who don't have it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a lot happens the same way in wrestling, where they're able to, a coach is able to bring out that. Of course, a lot of it's going to be acquired and being pushed to those limits. But when you find those that have the very best mental toughness, I think that that's something they've had their entire lives, or it's the way that they were brought up.
Yeah.
Or the families that they grew up in. I watched this show Billions.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep.
And to me, these guys are all about mental toughness.
Yeah.
And the way that they've acquired in their business and in their working careers, and they're always grinding for the competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that happens in life when you see these fabulous businessmen, and I have a friend that's this way, and he's incredibly tough. The way that he goes after it in business, he's also a wrestler, but the way that he's so competitive about his business and how he pursues things, and his drive and his goal. He never sits back. He's always pushing,
Mm-hmm.
And always trying to improve. And it's a different field than athletics, but it's the same field.
Same thing.
It's the exact same thing, and he blows me away about how his work ethic is incredible, but his mental toughness is even something extraordinary. And I don't think he probably had that same mental toughness in wrestling at that time in his life, but it's something that came out as he continued to grow and be successful as a business person.
Well, that's the great thing about wrestling, is that it teaches you all that.
Yes.
And the sad thing is, a lot of people, even who did other sports, but especially people who didn't do sports, they just have no idea how much further they can actually go,
Mm-hmm.
and how much is left in the tank.
Yes. And that's when you do a hand-to-hand combat sport, you better be tough, or else you're going to get hurt. And so you have to prepare yourself. Whether it's jiu-jitsu or boxing or MMA or wrestling or tennis or any of those sports, if you're not prepared to do the work, it's easy to quit. It's easy.
And you used to do a lot of stuff like that at Blair, unconventional stuff. I remember watching a flow video with you had some sticks with batons. I mean,
Yeah.
do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
What was that?
Those would probably get me in trouble these days. But
you were known for unconventional methods like that.
I would make kids fight a lot.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to bring out the toughness in them.
Yeah.
I would make them box, and it's a great way of. I think boxing is good in developing footwork and hand positioning at the same time. Something that I don't think we work enough as a country of developing footwork and being able to put people in position to score. And I think by going outside of the regular element of bringing toughness in with it, that's all I was trying to do, and it worked. I felt I had a team that went from being okay mentally wise to being really tough. The unfortunate thing behind that boxing was Stephen Mako stole my boxing equipment and was arranging matches back in the dormitory at 10 o'clock at night. And they were betting on it.
Oh, I mean, who would fight that guy at that school?
No. They would arrange matches with kids in the dorm.
Oh, not him.
Nobody would fight him.
I mean, he just seemed like such a larger than life guy. I mean, was the hype as real as it was now looking back on it?
Oh yeah.
When you were there?
Worse. He was. I mean, he was a freak because he's probably as tough of a human being as I ever met. And when it came time to compete, anybody he competed against was his enemy. And
he was going for blood.
He absolutely, every time, it didn't matter who it was,
good or bad.
He just wanted to go out and beat that guy to a pulp.
Yeah.
And it was good for other people to be exposed to something like that, because it brought them up another level of seeing how hard this guy, and he trained tremendously hard. He prepared incredibly well for people. He liked scouting. He liked to know. He loved to be. And this is all of these guys. And when I talk about a David Taylor and a Kyle Dake and a Jordan Burroughs, these are guys that love to be coached. They want to be coached, and I feel the same with the guys that I have here. I mean, I got a great job. I got guys that love to be coached. And that's the way Stephen was. Loved to be coached. Give me more. I need to do this. And, he would sneak into the weight room in the middle of the night and go get extra strength workouts. And I had to tell him, Steve, man, you got to calm it down.
This is a team with Perry, Esposito, Cooperman, all at Backus. I mean, eight.
Robbie Preston.
For eight first-team All-Americans, 8-6 All-Americans.
I don't even know. They all go together.
Crazy. But I mean, that team though, it's just unbelievable. But Mako in particular, though, he really still was just a man among boys in there.
Yes, and I used to have to send him over here to wrestle Kerry McCoy. I was an Olympian.
Olympian.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
People used to come in to wrestle with him. The big cat, Tom Erickson, unbelievably unselfish guy. He just wanted to. And the heavyweights are a little bit different. He just wanted to help a guy along that he thought could be really successful.
Yeah.
There was the guy who, I can't remember. It was incredible how many guys wanted to come out and work out with him.
So was like a Rollins going to the Beast, Tommy Rollins going to the Beast going to Ironman when you guys were going, or did he bump up against Mako in high school, or is this later that he kind of moved up to heavyweight?
It was later. He started out at like a 103-pounder. And then
Rollins did?
Yeah. He was freshman year was a 103-pounder, and then I think he might have been 189 by the time he graduated from high school, and then moved up to heavyweight. I'm not positive about that, but
it was later he went up to heavyweight to wrestle him.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Wow, fascinating. Well, Coach, we could talk all day, obviously, about stuff like this. What we always sign off with is, in a couple sentences, how would you say wrestling changed or saved or impacted your life? Out of things we've already hit on, but if you had to hit in a couple sentences.
Wrestling is my life. It's always been my life. It's always been a big part of my life. But in my life right now, this is what I do. And this is what I do every day. I work every day. I
literally 7 days a week.
7 days a week.
You were telling me your schedule earlier. It's crazy.
7 days a week. It doesn't matter the kid. I work with 8-year-old kids to, world-class guys, and find it fascinating on all different levels. Wrestling has impacted me so much that it's brought me to this point in my life. I'm 62 years old, and this is what I'm doing every day. And trying to bring something a little bit special to another person, and so they can enjoy the sport as much as I've enjoyed it. It's taught me a lot about, certainly about toughness. I think I was tough before I even started wrestling, but it brought out more of that. It's taught me to be humble. It's taught me how to win. It's taught me how to lose. It's taught me how to prepare. It's one of those kind of mind-boggling sports that can have a significant impact on who you are and how you do things.
Yeah, and the piece on losing is something that comes up every conversation we have. Is it teaches you how to lose, because in real life you're going to lose all the time.
All the time.
And you're going to experience difficulty, whether it's relationship, death, whatever. You're going to have a lot of hardship, whether you like it or not, and you got to be able to handle it.
Handle it and know how to handle the situation better the next time. And if you don't do anything about it, that's your fault.
Right.
You have a lot of control over those situations, and sometimes the other person's just better than you.
Yep.
I'm not going to say that to you, but we're still prepared to beat that person.
Well, don't you think that's why it's just as important to define success as being the best version you can be?
Yes.
Rather than you want to win an NCAA title, that's great. But.
So in working with kids, and establishing goals for them is retainable and realistic goals.
Right.
And that's the same thing in life. Things that everybody wants to be rich and famous, but
right.
I guess there are books out there. Anybody can be a millionaire. I haven't found that book yet.
But it's what does that even mean, though? I mean, what can you do today to do that?
Yeah.
Right. It's what 3 things can you do today? It's
yes.
Go to practice every day or whatever it is. Yep. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my days are really fun, and I look forward to working with the different talent levels. Sometimes it's when somebody doesn't get something that you're doing, and you keep going over and going over and going over and doing it, it can be frustrating. But sometimes I just think back about teaching somebody that was not that capable, and how much it meant to them to move through the sport, and to find that success level and what it meant to them. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And if kids want to get involved with your academy now, you're running Buxton Wrestling Academy, I believe it's called. How would they find that? How do they sign up for classes with you? Because I know if I had the chance to work with someone like you, I'd certainly do it. So how can parents do that? I'm not a social media guy. I have zero social media. What's the facility called?
It's called the Buxton Athletic Training Center.
Okay.
I have a person that runs the website. It's on Facebook. It's on Instagram. I think it's on Snapchat.
What type of services would they get there?
So we have a weight training facility as well as a big wrestling facility. We have 4 mats.
Wow.
We have a novice classes that go on, as well as elementary, and then we have high school, and then there are days that there are some elite level kids in there. Mostly we do the elite level stuff out of Lehigh.
Okay.
But I give the opportunity